In the last class, we left off talking about, bless you, natural selection, the steps of natural selection. Just review a little bit of that in this slide. So, if you imagine that this situation exists where we have a bunch of beetles, okay, on this leaf, in this predator. So, in natural selection, we have to start with some variation, differences among the individuals in a population. When you look at this drawing, what variation do you notice in the beetle population? They're not all identical, those beetles. Soraya? What's that? Yeah, that they're different shades to their exoskeleton. That's a variation. Some are green, some are a little darker, some are much darker. So there's some differences. Any other variety you see, Abby?
Different size.
They're also different sizes. Okay? So that's some natural variation that just happens to be in this population. Just like you and I have different skin color, we're different heights when we're fully grown. Well, same with these beetles. They have different, slightly different patterns on their exoskeleton. Some are larger, some are smaller. So they have variation just like we do. So we start with variation. Now in this example, there's a struggle for survival. Now sometimes that struggle is to get enough food or to find enough living space. What do you think the struggle would be that's being shown in this picture? Gavin?
The beetles are, will probably be eaten by the...
Yeah, there's a predator. And so the struggle for these beetles probably is to avoid being eaten. That's their struggle for survival in this situation. So, if you imagine this situation, which beetles do you think have the best traits, have the best characteristics to help them in this struggle for survival? Data?
The ones that are green, they want to be better for their good life.
Yeah, the ones that are a green color that matches the leaf, they blend in better. They're probably less likely to actually be eaten by this predator. Okay? And so the darker ones probably will be eaten more frequently. So there's a difference in survival. And so this dark one, do you think those dark ones that live in this environment, are they going to be able to reproduce much? No, because they're probably going to be gone. They're going to be eaten. How about the ones that blend in? They'll probably live longer and therefore can reproduce more. When they have little baby beetles, what do you think those baby beetles are going to look like?
A mix of both.
Could be. But if mostly the green ones are left, what do you think more of the offspring will be like? Probably that same color, right? Parents have offspring that have similar characteristics. So yeah, if you continue that for 1,000 generations, what do you think this species of beetles is going to end up looking like after thousands of generations? Tatum?
They're all going to be the same color leaves.
Yeah, they're probably all going to be green. There probably won't be any darker colored ones. Okay? And so we would say that species has evolved over those hundreds of generations. They went from being a mix of colors to being all camouflaging colors. So the species changed. Did any individual change during its lifetime? Did this beetle change into a green one? No, it's born that way. That's the way it's stuck. It's just going to get eaten. So the individuals don't evolve. The individual beetles don't change. But as a whole, the species does. So species evolve, individuals do not. That's an important thing to keep in mind. So why, let's first to summarize. Who's this guy? Charles Darwin. Person who sort of solidified our ideas about natural selection and evolution. Worked in the 1860s. We'll talk a little bit more about him in a minute. But the phrase we often use in natural selection is survival of the fittest. Have you heard that saying before? What does it mean, survival of the fittest? Kaiba?
The creature that has better things that they've adapted to and like will survive longer
Yeah, they're exactly right. So survival of the fittest just means that the organisms, the individuals that are best suited to their environment, that have the best characteristics, the most successful ones, they are going to survive better, and therefore they're going to, what goes along with survival? Reproduce. And they have offspring. And their offspring will probably resemble them. Offspring resemble the parents. So we say survival of the fittest means just that the ones that are best adapted are the ones that survive. Now what does it mean best adapted? How come we don't say survival of the strongest? Why don't we say it like that? Natalie?
Because, like, even if, like, you're the strongest beetle, there's still, you can't fight off the other animals and everything.
Yeah.
It just matters if you can hide in and figure out your way around
Yeah.
where you live.
In that example, we were just talking about being strong was not important. It was being camouflaged that was a better adaptation. So it's not always the strongest that survive. It's not always the smartest or the fastest or the most camouflaged. Sometimes it's good to stand out in your environment. It just depends on the individual situation. So that's why we say survival of the fittest. It takes all of that into account. So why do those beetles look different from each other? They were all one species. Why was there variation in their color? Nathan?
Because their parents had variation.
Yeah. In their parents, through sexual reproduction, as we talked about earlier in the unit, sexual reproduction results in sort of shuffling up characteristics and genes. So the offspring get sort of unique combinations. The offspring in sexual reproduction are different from the parents. There's variation introduced. And so that's a good thing for evolution. The more variation there is, the more chance you have a good trait, a good characteristic that's going to be helpful. And then there's another source of variation that's important. And it's called a mutation. Now you guys might have sort of a strange view of mutations because you haven't studied them. You may be thinking like X-Men or something, like a mutant or something from a comic book or a movie. But a mutation really means something different. In biology, mutation, so what determines all of our traits? Our what? Our DNA. Your genes, the DNA you inherited from your parents, that's what makes you who you are. But sometimes when your DNA is copying itself to make new cells, an error is made. A letter from the DNA gets switched. A new gene gets introduced. So there are sometimes these little mistakes. And sometimes these little mistakes can have an effect that's actually helpful. They can introduce a new trait, a new characteristic to the population that didn't exist there before. So these mutations add to the variation of the species. You know that darker colored beetle we saw? Maybe it was darker because of a mutation that changed the coloring of its exoskeleton a little bit. These mutations are usually small things, but over long, long periods of time they could build up and have significant changes in the species. So for the rest of today, what we're going to talk about are some examples of different adaptations that animals have developed through natural selection to help us sort of understand a little bit about how evolution works. First one's probably some of you have seen this animal before. What is that?
Peacock.
It's a peacock. The Utica Zoo, I think, they used to have them just like walking around the grounds. Do they still have them there?
Yeah, it's like
Sometimes they get out.
Yeah, sometimes they get out. Just all right. So that's a peacock. When you see this big tail there, what's its purpose? Nicholas?
scare off the other animals.
A lot of people say that. It's actually not so much for scaring off predators. It's for something else. James?
It's like a mate.
Yeah, it's to find a mate. Which of them have that big showy tail? Haley? The males only. this is a peacock. This is actually not called a peacock. It's called a peahen. This is the male. This is just like in chicken, that's a hen. That's a peahen. Together, they're called peafowl, is all of them. But yeah, only the males have those big, showy, bright tails. And it's because of reproduction. Because female peafowl choose a mate based on that tail. And so over time, they evolved to have large, showy tails. So during mating time, the female peahen, she chooses among the males as to which one she will mate with. And she chooses them based on their display of their tail feathers. And so if a male has a bright, showy, colorful tail, he's more likely to what? Find a mate, which leads to reproduction. What if one of these males is born with a gene that makes their tail just kind of small and boring? What's that?
It's gonna die.
Well, not so much that it's going to die,
There won't be mating production.
it's not going to reproduce. And so probably not going to pass on that gene to its offspring. So the more impressive the tail, the higher its chance of mating. And so because the females choose their mates in this way, that has led to male peacocks having these bright, showy feathers. Now, lots of species exhibit this sort of selection. It's called sexual selection, in which the course of evolution has been altered by how mates are chosen. In many species, you'll often find the males of the species are brightly colored, and the females are not. They're sort of boring colored. Does anyone know what mallard ducks look like? You might see them in a lake around here in the Adirondack. Mallard duck, it's got that green head.
Oh, I have two in my.
The ones with the green head are actually the males. They are colorful. Do you know what a female mallard duck looks like? Haley?
That's like a brown head.
Yeah, it's just kind of brown and like black and tan. It looks kind of like that color. And again, those are adaptations. The female is more camouflage because it has to care for the eggs, it has to care for the young. The brightly colored male, it has that coloration to help attract mates. So in any population, any variation, any difference that's helpful, that's selected for, becomes more and more common over time, becomes more abundant. Any variation that's harmful or prevents reproduction becomes rare over time. So like we said the other day, a female fish can release thousands of eggs at one time. They all cannot possibly survive into adulthood. Only a small percentage do survive. Which ones survive? Maybe the bigger ones, maybe not.
The ones more adapted.
The ones that have, yes, the best traits, the ones that are most adapted, that have whatever characteristics are going to help them be successful. Look at this little video show. Another example of this. No sound, but see a little creature here. See Mr. Arcuri talking with his friend. Not being very nice. Don't feel too bad.
Is that you?
Yeah. Okay. Again, so that variation was helpful to me in that situation.
Mr. DeVos, I'm not Mr. Teresa.
What's that, Mr. Richards? So, you guys already told me, who is the scientist that gave us many of our ideas about natural selection? Anybody else? Charles Darwin. He was a scientist, he lived in the 1800s. He became a naturalist aboard a ship called the HMS Beagle. And he took years to travel all the way around the entire world, visiting all sorts of different continents and places, South America, Africa, Asia. And on his journey, he carefully observed, collected, took notes on all the different living things he saw. That led him to start to think about, well, why are there so many different things? Why is there such a diversity of life? Why do certain species look similar to others? And that allowed him to sort of come up with his ideas about natural selection. One of the places Darwin visited was the Galapagos Islands. They're a series of small islands off the coast of South America. Darwin visited the Galapagos Islands. When he went to, it's a whole bunch of islands that are sort of separated from each other. When he went there, what he found was that the finches, these small birds on these islands, they each had a beak that was unique from the finches on the other islands. He noticed that their beaks were perfectly adapted to whatever foods were common on the island he was on. So his idea was that all of these finches that lived on each of these different islands actually came from one original finch species. One original finch species migrated from the mainland of South America onto these Galapagos Islands. Okay? And then, as time went on, each finch on these little islands started to evolve in a different way. They each evolved so that their beaks suited the foods that were on those islands. So some of these finches, their beaks evolved to chew through fruit and get at the nutrients in the fruit. Some finches fed on seeds, but on some islands there were thick, hard seeds that had to be cracked open to get inside of. And the finches on those islands, they evolved their big, thick beaks like this. On other islands, the seeds were pretty small and easier to break open. Those birds evolved to have these smaller beaks. Some finches fed on insects on certain islands. The smaller insect ones had smaller beaks. The larger insect-feeding finches had larger beaks. Some even developed these sharp, pointy beaks to poke into cactuses to eat them. So each of these finches, they all look pretty much the same except for their bill. And again, the reason is because natural selection caused those different types of finches to evolve differently from each other. Has anyone had strep throat in the past years? Okay, a lot of you have. All right. So let's say I'm going to relate strep throat to evolution, natural selection. So let's say you had strep throat. So your throat starts getting sore, it hurts. Parents look at your throat, it's all red in there, so you go to the doctor. The doctor puts that big Q-tip thing in the back of your throat, takes a culture of it. They're testing to see if it's actually strep throat. Let's say the test comes back positive. You do have strep throat. What's causing your throat to hurt? When you test positive, what's going on in your throat? Yeah? Yeah, there's a certain type of bacteria, streptococcus bacteria. That's the name, that's where it's called strep throat. This bacteria is living inside your throat. It got introduced there, sort of took hold. It's living inside your throat. It's damaging the cells inside your throat. They're becoming inflamed and red and irritated. That's why your throat hurts. So what does the doctor do to help you feel better? Abby?
Give you this really gross pink medicine.
Yeah, that pink bubblegum tasting amoxicillin. What is that? What do we call that type of medication?
Liquid.
It's a liquid, but it's got a certain name. Tatum? Yeah, it's an antibiotic, right? And so this antibiotic is a special medicine that can kill bacteria. So you take it for a day, 2 days, okay? It's going through your system, and it's starting to kill off the bacteria in your throat. Okay? And they're dying off, and your throat starts feeling better. So 2 days goes by and your throat doesn't hurt anymore. So you just dump it down the drain and then you're fine? What are you supposed to do with that medicine? Keep taking it. Sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes 10 days. You need to take all of it. And the reason they tell you to take all of it, even if you're feeling better, is because of evolution. Because when you first take it for a day, which bacteria that are in your throat die off? The weakest ones, right? The ones that after just a day of being exposed to this medicine, they die off. They're weak. All right, after 2 days, which ones are died off? One's a little bit stronger. And so probably most of them after a few days, they've died. Okay? And so if you stop taking your medicine because it's starting to feel better, but there's probably still some left in your throat still alive. Which ones are still left? The strongest, the ones that are most resistant to antibiotics. So if you throw away your medicine, what happens to your sore throat? It comes back, because those stronger ones that were left over, they survive, and therefore they can reproduce, and the infection starts coming back. But this time, when those strong bacteria reproduce, what are their offspring probably like? Probably also strong. And so this infection comes back, your throat starts hurting again, but this time, it's even worse. This time, maybe going for another prescription of amoxicillin isn't going to help it, because those bacteria in your throat, they've adapted. Okay? And so you may have to switch to a different antibiotic. There are some types of bacterial infections that are resistant to almost all antibiotics that we have. They're very dangerous because they've evolved over time to become resistant to these. And so if you get an infection with one of those resistant bacteria, it's not good. The same happens with pesticides that we spray to kill insects and so forth. Many organisms have evolved to have camouflage coloration. What's the purpose of camouflage? Gavin?
Or the birds to not like catch away from.
So it helps you avoid predators because you blend in with your environment. Or sometimes it helps you blend in so you could sneak up on your prey. So I'll show you some examples because there's some neat things here. This is a flounder. It's a fish that lives in the bottom of the ocean floor, and its coloration sort of blends in perfectly with like the rocks and sand and gravel in the bottom of the ocean. You almost can't see it there. These are ibixes. They are tiny, they're small deer-like creatures. They live in the Middle East. You see them? How many? See this one? See this tiny one facing you? Yeah. You see this one right here? Hopping across the rock? Again, their coloration allows them to blend in with that background very well, so it's difficult for predators to find them. These are peppered moths. We're going to be spending a lot of time tomorrow and Thursday talking about these peppered moths. But they come in two colorations. Light-colored pepper moths, which blend in well in a light background, or darker peppered moths, which blend in on a dark background. This is a katydid. This is an insect. That's not a leaf. It's the actual insect. You can see its legs here. It looks exactly like a leaf. It almost looks like it has veins like a leaf does. Helps them blend in very well. Even like a cat is camouflage. See a cat in that picture? Pretty tough to find if you don't know where it is. Ben, you see it?
Yeah.
Where? Tell me, up or down?
Up, stop. To the right, to the left, a little more, there.
No. That's just some ground. Tatum, you see it? Where?
Right there.
Right here?
Yeah.
No.
I try to think it. Oh.
Good?
I thought it was up there.
Its face
It's not an illusion, it just blends in.
After you see it, it's like so obvious that it's there.
Yeah. Again, these are the pepper moths, which we're going to be talking about tomorrow. You can see the moths. Another interesting trait that many species evolved is something called mimicry. If I mimic you, what am I doing? Copying everything you do, the way you stand, how you drink. That's what a mimic means. And so many animals have evolved mimicry, where they've evolved to look like another species. Sometimes they do this to attract prey, sometimes to discourage predators. But I'll show you some neat examples of mimicry. Is this a snake you like to find when you're out hiking? No. What is it? Yeah, it's extremely poisonous. It can kill you.
No, it's not.
It's a coral snake.
Oh.
This is not a coral snake. So why is this coral snake so brightly colored? Why did it evolve to have very bright patterns where you would obviously see it if it was anywhere near you? Haley?
Because it shows that it's poisonous.
Yeah, those bright colors are a signal to predators saying, hey, I'm poisonous, better not eat me. That's why many poisonous animals have evolved to very bright colors. This is not poisonous. This is a scarlet king snake. It's not poisonous at all. Why has it evolved to have those bright patterns on it if it's not poisonous? Right?
Because it like has the same kind of things.
Yeah. It takes advantage of the fact that most predators are not going to eat a snake that looks like this. They're probably not going to eat the king snake, even though it's not poisonous. It actually is not the same pattern. Does anybody know the saying that you could use to remember which is which?
Red next to yellow is a dangerous fellow.
Red next to yellow, I've heard as you're a dead fellow. Red next to black,
Friend of Jack.
yep, you're safe, Jack, is the other one I heard. So red next to yellow, you're a dead fellow. Red next to black, you're safe, Jack. So the actual pattern is a little bit different between the two. What kind of butterfly is this? A monarch. Okay? Monarch are poisonous because they eat milkweed and they incorporate a poison from the milkweed plant into their body. So most things don't eat monarch butterflies, most predators.
What happens if it lands on you?
It's not, it's just dangerous. As long as you don't eat it, Abby, you'll be okay. This is not a monarch butterfly, it's a viceroy butterfly. It looks almost identical. Okay? It's evolved to mimic the monarch to take advantage of the fact that most predators are not going to eat the monarch. This is the bee orchid. This is a plant. So it has purple petals, but then the lower sepal has like this brown fuzzy fur stuff on it. And it looks just like a bee. And what happens is bees visiting this flower think that's a bee and they try to mate with it, even though it's just part of the flower. So they try to mate with this part of the flower and that helps them to pollinate plant to plant. That's a snake. Okay? And this is a caterpillar. This is a snake and the caterpillar that mimics, it looks like a snake. Looks like the eyes of a snake. Yes, those are caterpillars. What's this? That's a fly. It looks like a bee. It has evolved to mimic this yellow and black pattern that's typical of bees, again, to avoid predation. What's that?
Spider.
No,
It's a moth.
this is a moth.
Oh, that's
These are not legs. That's a pattern on the wings of this moth that makes it look like a spider. Okay, this is another swallowtail. This is a caterpillar, okay, which mimics the eye of a bird. Many things mimic leaves. These willow leaves, if you see, this is the head of an insect grasping onto the branch. This is its body. Looks identical to the leaf.
Couldn't the body easily rest?
Yeah, but it blends in. Again, this is the body of this insect. These are its limbs. Again, it looks exactly like a leaf. This is its head.
I bet it
These
eats
are
like
its limbs.
not the same kind of tree thing.
What if a caterpillar comes along?
Yeah. Another catadid crawling across. You can see its body is just like a leaf. Lots of things mimic seaweed. There's a fish mimic seaweed. Another one. Toad that mimics leaves, dead leaves in the forest. It's camouflage. Another fish. So those are all examples of mimicry, of camouflage. Many, many species have evolved over time to have this pattern. Just a couple quick things here. These mice of different colors, which one do you think is the most fit? We say survival of the fittest. Which one is the most successful if we're thinking about evolution? Ben?
The tan mice,
Why tan?
because how much it survives and how much more babies.
Yeah. So if you look at the speed, it's the slowest of them, but it lived the longest and more importantly, reproduced the most, producing 11 babies. How about if we look at these lions? George, Lucky, Spot, and Slick. What do you think, which do you think is the most successful lion in terms of evolution? Gavin?
Lucky,
Lucky? How come?
because it's cracked the most years.
So he lived the longest. What else?
And
Bless you.
the number of pups
Had the most cubs. Could anyone argue for something else? Matt?
I think Slick, but because he didn't survive as long, but his size was 9 feet, and his number of cubs surviving to adulthood was 19, which was the most.
Yeah. If we think of sort of natural selection and evolution as being about how much of your genetic material you can get into the future generations, then I would agree. Slick is probably the best adapted, the most fit, because it allowed 19 of its cubs to survive into adulthood. That would probably be the most successful of the line.
So do we just have to study for the quiz tomorrow?
No quiz tomorrow. We're just doing our lab tomorrow. So we're in the computer lab tomorrow to work on our lab.
For the quiz.
Well, yeah, so your quiz on Friday will be on mostly just the natural selection and evolution portion of this. No homework tonight.